Besides data centers, do you hear about property taxes, I presume?
Yeah,
People,
absolutely. People don't like property taxes. They think they're too high. Again, they're concerned a lot with privacy, where information is being shared. So I think those are the two major things that I'm hearing. Now, if you were to ask me what different people from different sides of the spectrum are telling me, I'm hearing a lot from Democrats. They're concerned about this whole vote no versus vote yes. That's also a concern of Republicans. I'm hearing from Democrats that the concern is that this is just an easy way for us to really get some justices in office that will overturn the our abortion rights, essentially, which we already voted on in 2022.
and splendid.
You would think that's enough to drop the subject, it's going to keep being a subject, unfortunately, in Kansas.
It's really hard to tell how that vote's going to go. It was the same thing with I wasn't here in 2022, but I was paying attention. It was the same thing with that. We really had no idea how it was going to go.
Absolutely.
But I think that is going to be a really good indicator of how the general's going to go.
Mhm.
If too many people, if it passes, then that answers a lot of questions. And if it fails, that I think if it fails, the people, I feel like the Republicans that are running for office are going to have to change course on their messaging that
Sure.
they have right now.
Sure.
And I think it's going to be, I'm really interested to see how many unaffiliateds turn out to vote on it, since there are so many of them now. And that's the message I'm pushing right now is I don't care if you pick a party, go vote on this one thing. And it's a constitutional amendment. It has long-term ramifications. And it is about abortion, but it's also about school funding. They want them to be able to overturn all those court cases and basically just have the last bit of control and power, and it doesn't go away. It's a big
And
deal.
that's really so concerning to me also, just for the fact that historically conservatives and Republicans have been so anti-big government. And what's more big government than what they're trying to do right now at the day?
What I figured the other day is that because somebody was talking about Trump comparing himself to, was it Roosevelt? I don't know. He was visiting the thing, and it was Roosevelt. And because Roosevelt was a Republican. And I said, but what has
Mhm.
happened is the Tea Party took over the Republican Party and dragged them all right, further right. And then
Mhm.
the Democrat Party as a whole, as a being, I'm not talking about every single person, people get upset, but I'm talking about the people in power at
Right.
the federal level. Instead of,
Mhm.
at the same time, they have progressive people trying to come in and do what the Tea Party's doing, but to the Democrats. And so the
Mhm.
Democrats at that time, like 2008 and that time, they spent so much time fighting off the takeover of progressives, and then at first discounted the threat of Tea Party, but then
Mhm.
spent so much time and resources fighting off the pull to going to the left that they then moved to the right, trying to appeal to more the right because they thought we have to win Republicans a way to win.
Sure.
And as they moved further right, they lost people. And then now the Democrats of today are really the Roosevelt Republicans yesterday, or maybe even 90s
Yes.
Republicans, Kansas in some areas. And so that means that the Democrats are really Republicans and the Republicans are just something way off. And then you have now, it's not hard to be progressive in Kansas. You know what I mean? It's pretty easy to be radical or
Yeah.
progressive or whatever in Kansas because of that. And they
Mhm.
keep doing it, and it's not working here.
Sure.
The middle of the road stuff's it's not flipping
No.
seats. And
No.
so I think people just I think at the end of the day, they want someone that's different. I don't think this is scary, but I don't think a lot of people put that much thought into their vote.
Sure.
A lot of them don't. I think they look at you and they think, "Oh, she seems relatable and I
Right.
like her.
Yeah.
I want to get a beer with her or whatever."
Sure.
And so she gets my vote and they go off their gut a lot of the times. I don't think that people are as diehard about the parties as the parties like to think they make us
Yeah.
believe they are.
I could see that even with people who are still working full-time parents, those of us who are pretty much in that category of 30 to 50, a lot of us aren't thinking so deeply into these elections, mostly because we're so busy just living in survival mode. And even psychology will tell you, you do not have the ability to focus on those types of concepts. If you're just focused on, okay, I gotta pay my bill tomorrow. I gotta rob Peter to pay Paul. They're worried about getting enough hours to get their paycheck. They're worrying about how they're going to meet their deductible so they can have their colonoscopy. So there are so many things that are in the forefront of people's minds that everything else seems to just really get drowned out.
And for me, it feels like no matter who's been in power, I've always been broke. As I made more money, it didn't matter because it just got ate up. And then I finally got degrees and I made more money and then it got ate up. And then like you're talking about your dad making 50,000, I used to think, oh man, if I could make $50,000, I'd be set. $50,000 and I could barely afford to live in Wichita, Kansas.
Yes.
And that's insane. And so I think that it, like I said earlier, I think it's now getting to a point where there are people becoming financially uncomfortable that weren't before. There are the next generation is by far poorer than the generation before it, doing worse than the generations before us, and that's not normal. And so I think there's a lot of people that grew up with money or they grew up comfortably that are now not comfortable as adults and don't know what to do because they weren't like me, right? I've always been poor, right? So I can make do and I know what it's like to not have any money. But when you never have been taught what it's like to not have money in it, I just think a lot more people now are feeling the pain of this because I know I've never been so broke. 2008 recession, it was happening. I heard about it on the news. I remember it not having really any impact on my life. Everyone's freaking out. And I'm like, I'm just the same. This is different. I've just never seen so many people making so much money and yet being so broke still.
It behooves the current system for all of us to be overworked and exhausted. It truly does. And I firmly believe that. And I often find myself wondering and dreaming about a society in which that's not the case. And I can be a dreamer, but I'm also a realist. And I would say that it's an awful time in history when you have to do extraordinary things just to live an ordinary life. And I think of Kansans as a whole, we're like a really hard-working group of people. We are super resilient, but it comes to a point where, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps no longer works. And just like you said, there are more people who, that's their reality now, or that's going to be their reality in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, whatever. And then that's been the reality for some people their entire lives. And for them, they think this is more or less the same of what I've already been dealing with. Why should I care? The thing that I tell people is it doesn't have to be this way. And it starts with being transparent. It starts with building trust, and that being transparent is part of that. But it also goes back to trusting people to make their own decisions, especially if they're having all their needs met. And I truly believe that one of the first things that we have to do to turn things around is restore trust in our processes. And maybe that means changing the way that we do things. Perhaps that means looking at how we can get rid of a two-party system. I don't know what that looks like yet, but my intent as a representative is to translate that for the people. I plan on being someone who's transparent. I plan on being the person who is getting on TikTok or a live stream and is summarizing all the work that's been done that day and the things that have been discussed, because people deserve to know. And they also deserve to be talked to, just like you and I are talking, neighbor to neighbor, person to person. And we've relied too heavily upon a system that uses jargon and terminology that the everyday person cannot necessarily understand. And government needs to be working for the people, not against it. And what we're experiencing right now is a government that truly feels like it's working against us.
It feels like it's working for corporations. It feels like they're overly concerned with economic development. I hate that word. I hate it because of what they've done to it. They're so concerned about getting, I was just complaining earlier about it. They're so concerned about getting visitors or tourists or whatever that they're not concerned about. Like, if the mayor of Chicago said something along the lines of, he said something like, I'm worried about making Chicago somewhere people want to live. And I believe that will make it a place where people want to visit. And then when they visit, they want to stay here. And that's how we grow. So
Yeah,
let's worry about making a place people want to live, and then we can worry about making it a place people want to visit.
absolutely. And isn't it interesting? That is also the same thing that people want in Kansas. And where I come from, Salina, you can't compare Salina and Chicago, right? But that is something that is felt even in Salina. I don't know. Every Kansan, you really deserves the dignity that comes from meaningful work. And that means quality health care. That means strong public schools. That means safe communities and the opportunity to build a better future for themselves and the generations that come after them. And that also involves looking at what opportunities do our young people have? We're hemorrhaging young people out of the state of Kansas every single day, and specifically in rural areas. Even in Salina, we're having a hard time growing. We're doing everything that we're supposed to be doing, checking off all these boxes. But the reason these young people are not staying is because they can't envision a future in Kansas. They've experienced it. And I get it. I hope that I want my children to follow the dreams that they want, that they have in their heart. But if they want to live at home, I would want them to feel like they have opportunities that they can take to where they're living good lives here in Kansas. I come from people where none of us are extraordinary. We're just average, everyday Kansans. And my family goes back 6 generations. And Kansans are not difficult to understand. We're very simple people. We just want to live our ordinary lives.